Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Build Training Trip Harem with Tayuya Karin and Sakura, Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. This is the last time, you hear me. I have to get cleaned up. With Cho nodding his head like a doll on a stick, she gets down between his spread legs and runs her fingers up from his balls to the tip, getting an appreciative for her effort. She does it a couple of more times to see his reaction. As she wraps her hands fully around his, one above the others, she feels for the first time more in control of what is going on. Now that the freak out part of this is over, she begins to focus more on what it feels like to be doing this. It's hot in the tent, smells like and sweat with a muskiness that makes her feel warm on the inside. As she moves her hands, the feeling of the wrapping around her chest begins to rug again her super hard S. Pressing her knees tight together, she unconsciously begins to rub her thighs together, causing little shocks in her core. Getting into a steady rhythm, she looks up at Cho to see him looking at her the way he looks at a full plate of barbecue ribs. Breaking eye contact, she increases her movements and looks back down at the in her hands. Its bright red head poked in and out of her hands. "Oh Kami Ino, I can't help it." Expecting the jets of cum to start, Ino begins to sit up, but suddenly a pair of hands wrap around her head and hold her in place. Slowly he begins to breathe harder and pulls her closer. Feeling trapped in his hands, she feels her core heating up more and more. Her ache to be touched with every movement. With hair in the air, she starts to feel her own juices running down her legs. "I am so close, Ino, please don't stop." With that warning, the first stream hits Ino in the forehead. No, not the hair. She thinks quickly, what to do, as the next stream hits the side of her face and runs across her nose to the other cheek. Knowing that the next one is going to hit her hair for sure, she lowers her mouth over the head and as hard as she can. Cho, feeling the wonderful warm wet suction, loses control and pushes his down the back of Ino's throat and lets 1, 2, 3 quick loads directly down her throat. Pulling back a little, he lets the last load loose as the head of his fills her mouth. Ino swallows what she can and feeling Cho's hands dropping away, she sits up and glares at Cho. Wiping the back of her hand across her mouth, she sees Cho passed out in front of her. Seeing that his is completely deflated and the danger of oozing poisoning long past, she stands up and looks at the total mess inside the tent. Dumping the contents of Cho's backpack onto the floor, she finds one of his clean t-shirts. Stripping down to nothing, she pulls it on. It is long enough to reach her knees and protect her modesty. Stuffing all of her slimy clothes and bandages into Cho's backpack, she leaves the tent, the fresh clean air hitting her like a wind jutsu. Garbing her sandals off the ground, she stomps her way past the two men still at the fire, daring them to say one little word, and enters her tent on the other side of the clearing. "Troublesome, you think she's okay," said the Nara. "Yeah, she will get over it, they all do." Sakura looked at her friend in stunned silence. She had nothing to say as she had almost done the same with Naruto. "So, is that why you're not wearing bandage wraps anymore?" Trying to change the subject before Ino turned it on her. "Yes, it seems Choji has a thing for bare skin and Shikamaru likes to be teased with a flash of panties. Besides, getting cum stains out of purple is almost impossible in the field." Standing up and giving a spin around caused her shirt to flare out, giving a glimpse of pink and lace before falling back down. "Ino, how could you? People are looking," cries out Sakura. "Oh, calm down, they are not. Have you seen the way some of the older kunoichi dress?" Sitting back down, giving her friend a bright smile, Ino takes a sip of tea. Before Ino has a chance to turn the conversation to her, Sakura asks, "So Shikamaru, you go all the way with him or Choji?" "No, like I said, Shikamaru just likes to look and not touch, and Cho, well, once he calms down he can barely look at me without turning bright red. I mostly use my hands or sometimes my mouth, that's about it." "What do you mean? Just look?" Sakura gives her friend a confused look. "Oh, I dance around his tent taking my clothes off and he takes care of himself. I have to do it real slow so he had time to finish 2 or 3 times, said Ino. All your clothes? An increasingly pink Sakura says. No, not all. By the time I take my bra off, he completely loses it and passes out. He is a real pervert, that one, said a grinning Ino as she ate some of her cake. So stop changing the subject, Sakura, and tell me, how do you deal with Naruto? I know he is a ball of energy and can't sit still. He is so short too. I bet he doesn't even have a big one to fill your hand, right? Said Ino. Oh, if you only knew, thought Sakura, turning pink behind a cup of tea. Come on, Sakura. I told you so, now spill it, said Ino, pushing the point. You can't tell anyone, you got to swear. Please, Ino, said Sakura, knowing that Ino loved to gossip. Okay, okay. I swear on my clan's name I will not repeat a word you say, okay? Said Ino, leaning forward. Well, it all started when we were on a mission to deliver a scroll and some bandits attacked us. After 20 minutes of telling Ino the whole story of their first encounter, Ino just sat back and looked at her friend and the cold cup of tea in front of her. Holding her hands about 10 inches apart, Ino said, so that big? A little bigger actually. Not as big as Choji but big, added Sakura, getting over any embarrassment. Oh, that was just that one time when he used that jutsu. He can't use it more than once a month as it uses up so much of his, fat, said Ino, still looking at how far apart her hands were. So you haven't gone all the way then? Asked Ino, dropping her hands down on the table. No, of course not, the pink-haired girl said, looking around thinking the whole world must be listening but seeing no one, sits back in her seat. Seeing a flash of orange down the street, Sakura stands up. I've got to go, Ino. See you around, said Sakura before running off, hoping to find Naruto in need of some help. Ino sat there, wondering what new changes were coming after the finals. Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw Sasuke walking down the street with Kakashi-sensei. Curious, she decided to do a little spying of her own. The idea that Sasuke may have a thing for his sensei made her walk a little faster. It would be the crowning jewel in her gossip circle if she found that out. Sakura was truly worried as Naruto entered the arena to face off with Neji. It was said he was a true genius, and from what he told everyone who would listen, he was his generation's prodigy. She looked at him as the Sasuke of his class, a well-trained with a stick up her inner voice's opinion, making itself known. Being in agreement with herself, she sat and waited for the round to begin. Seeing the crazy power Lee had in the preliminary rounds of the exams and hearing from their teammate Tenten that Neji beat Lee in every spar had put Sakura on the edge of her seat. Sakura feared what was going to happen to Naruto, only hoping it wasn't going to be career-ending in the same way Gaara had ended Lee's hopes. As Naruto ran into the arena wall, having lost control of himself running down the stairs, Neji just looked at him like he was some kind of bug that needed to be squashed. Shaking off the dust, Naruto walked over to stare down the Hyuga like nothing had happened. Sakura always admired the way Naruto didn't dwell on his mistakes and ran forward to his next. As the proctor explained the rules, Sakura couldn't help but look around as her friend Ino came down the seating stairs to sit next to her. What happened? Your mother gave you a hard time again? Asked Sakura as Ino sat next to her. Yeah, a little, but I wanted to sit closer anyway, so when I saw you I told them I promised to sit with you, added Ino as she joined Sakura. Hearing a roar from the crowd, the girls turned to see that Neji had sent Naruto flying into the wall with a well-placed kick and was just standing there waiting. The insults from the civilians sitting around the two girls were surprising to hear as the orange-adorned boy ran back to the fight. It seems like the whole village but the ninjas hated Naruto with a passion. As the match continued, Neji wasted no time in unleashing a flurry of Byakugan precise strikes, his gentle fist technique aimed at disrupting Naruto's chakra network. Naruto displayed surprising agility, evading Neji's attacks with a combination of speed and unpredictability even with half his chakra network closed off. When the fight entered its 10th minute, the crowd seemed to begin to respect Naruto's determination as he continued to keep getting back up. He didn't have a lot of jujitsus, but what he did have he used with gusto. Sakura could see he was getting tired, even for a ball of energy like Naruto. Getting hit 100 times was wearing him down. Naruto summoned an army of clones at one point, trying to overwhelm Neji, forcing him to use the feared Hyuga rotation. It was after this that Neji tried to use his defeatist Tak no Jutsu on Naruto. As Sakura listened, she smiled, knowing that Naruto Tak no Jutsu was far superior, having seen him use it on many enemy ninjas. Being out of breath, Naruto let Neji tell his story of fate and defeat, how one could never rise above the station they were born in. The long-haired pale-eyed boy was good. Sakura would give him that, but not as good as Naruto. The arena was quiet as they waited for Naruto to respond. After a few minutes of allowing Neji to drown on, Naruto slowly pulled himself up to his full height, and looking at the slightly taller boy said, "Get over it," his Tak no Jutsu reaching the whole area. To Sakura's shock, she heard Ino yelling by her side as Naruto shook his head and with a dramatic flair flung his hand up. "So what? Your struggles are nothing compared to what I have to deal with, and fate isn't in control of me. I am in control of my own destiny," said Naruto. "You tell him, kid." A man below Sakura yells as Naruto jumps back and places his hands together tightly in his trademark clone sign. Glaring at the other boy, Naruto screams, "I've been beaten, stabbed, burned, and strangled." Now totally red-faced, Naruto looked over to his opponent. "I've been told my whole life to give up, and you expect me to start now because of fate? Well, you and your fate or destiny or whatever. I am my own man and will do whatever I have to. I will be Hokage someday and your fate will not stop me." What is he doing making signs now? Neji has closed all of his pathways, Ino asked Sakura as she leaned forward. Everyone could see Naruto trying to draw chakra with no effect. "Even you're not so stupid to try to draw chakra with your pathways closed," Neji said, crossing his arms as he looked over to the proctor. "End this match or I will end him." Neji was visibly distressed, not wanting to kill a fellow Leaf Nin. Getting closer to Ino, she whispers, "What the do you think he is doing?" Ino shook her head that she had no idea. As Sakura moved to the edge of her seat, she watched Naruto's body tense as he let out a scream, trying his best to call forth his chakra. The whole stadium seemed to be on edge, waiting for something to happen, all of the adults knowing what he contained and hoping it doesn't come to that. More than a few eyes were looking up at the cage viewing box, hoping he knew what he is doing, allowing Naruto to fight on. "When you beat Hinata into the ground, I promised her I would defeat you." Naruto's voice was getting deep and a low growl seemed to be coming from inside him. The crowd turned quiet, some getting out of their seats and many looking up to the cages. They all could hear him when he said, "This is for Hinata." Once the echo of Hinata's name stopped bouncing around the arena, Naruto's body glowed and then exploded with red chakra. Half the crowd cheered and half go up to run for the exits. "Holy shit." Ino jumped up to the railing and was hanging off screaming. She bounced back to her seat and turned to Sakura. "I can't believe it, he actually did it." Neji stared at the red glow around the orange-clad boy and prepared to show him that fate was in control of this match and that no loser was going to beat him. With a hand sign, the whole field of the arena was filled with hundreds of clones, all glaring at Neji. Sakura looked on, knowing where the chakra was coming from and what it was doing to Naruto. She jumped to the railing to get a better look at the real Naruto in the center of it all, with Ino joining her. She wanted to tell her friend that that wasn't his real chakra. His chakra was warm and filled with hope. No, this chakra was hate and anger. It was going to do things to Neji if Naruto couldn't control it. Watching the tendrils of energy shoot around her teammate's body, Sakura couldn't help but smile as she heard him take control. "I made a promise to Hinata, and what kind of future Hokage can't even keep his word?" With those words, all the clones closed in at once on Neji. He put up a fight to remember as clones flew into the air and burst. His hands moving faster than the best ninja could follow, he struck down the army of clones until only the original was standing. Breathing heavily and looking at his opponent, Neji felt a hint of doubt. Naruto moved, faster than he had ever moved before. Neji was unable to hit him as he closed in and landed a gut punch that sent him flying across the arena's floor. Sakura, knowing the incredible amount of oozing that was building up in Naruto, felt a very familiar heat form in her stomach and work its way down. Wow, Ino said at her side, a small smile on her face as she kept her eyes on the action. When Naruto get kind of cool? Sakura wanted to respond, he was always cool, but she was speechless as her own body betrayed her. This need to be with Naruto was consuming her thoughts. A mass of red chakra had formed around Naruto's hand as he slammed into Neji's rotating wall of chakra. The resulting explosion threw both boys against opposite walls. The smoke from the clones and the dusk from the explosion obscured everything in the arena. She was just barely able to see figures moving to the center to once again face each other. A gust of wind cleared everything away, a wind jujitsu from one of the Jonin, she assumed, as the contestants staggered to stand face to face once again. Neji made the first move, hitting Naruto with his gentle fist on many of his chakra points before he could jump away. Naruto swayed before going down on one knee, looking like a picture of defeat as Neji moved to the down boy to stand over him. The crowd was torn on who to cheer for, the one they had been taught to hate for years or the arrogant prick he was fighting. No, get up, yelled Ino, leaning over the railing and giving all the men a good look at her shapely. Naruto, you can do this, get up, screamed Sakura beside Ino, also leaning forward and gaining a few onlookers who appreciated her smaller, compacted shape. Naruto spots his two female friends waving and screaming at him and gives a small nod. Neji, with his Byakugan fully active, sees the two girls and sneers, your looser teammate and her friend mean nothing, you mean nothing as fate has decreed I will win this match. You, Neji, and fate, screams inner Sakura, getting an aghast look from Ino before she joins in with swearing at the follower of fate. Sakura had to bite her own tongue to stop Inner from going too far with the obscenities she didn't even know she knew. Allowing destiny to control your life may be your way, but it's not mine, Naruto yells for the entire audience to hear as he sinks his fist in Neji's gut, bending him over. His follow-up punch lands squarely on Neji's chin, laying him out on the ground spread out cold. Yes, the girls screamed together seeing Neji's unmoving form. Now as he stood over the fallen Hyuga, he says, laying down like a bitch for destiny may be the Hyuga way, but it sure as hell ain't ever gonna be mine. His voice echoed over the crowd as he waved his fist in the Hyuga boy's face. You tell him, kid, an unseen man yells out. The crowd paused for a moment before ecstatically cheering for the blue-eyed boy they once hated. Looking at his bleeding hands and feeling the burn of the nine-tail chakra in his veins, he stared at Neji, waiting for the proctor to call the match. This can't be happening, Neji wheezed angrily through clenched teeth as he stared up at Naruto. I can't lose to you, I can't. Naruto kneels down next to the boy who was his opponent. For the record, 3 times I failed my graduation exam, 3 times, because of one jutsu that I couldn't pull off no matter how hard I tried. If I had graduated the first time, I would be a year ahead of you and this wouldn't have happened. Neji let his head drop, and Sakura could practically feel Naruto's smile as he said, you've been called a genius all your life, and I was the failure who failed because of a lousy clone jutsu. So, don't come whining to me about destiny, and stop telling me you can't change destiny. If I can do it, so can you. Neji seemed to steal his nerves, closing his eyes as Naruto slowly started turning away, only for his eyes to pop open as Naruto said, after all, you're no failure. I will think about it. Neji let his head drop again, and the crowd went wild. I can't believe he did it, he beat Neji. Ino stepped back from the railing with an audible of disappointment from a couple of men behind her. Arms crossed, she faced Sakura. I have to admit, I didn't think he could pull it off. Sakura could have cried in happiness as she watched Naruto run towards the exit slowly, a cheerful smile on his face as he ran and jumped to the many cheers. You know, She heard a woman behind her say almost quietly as she looked over at the teenage girl sitting next to her. He's growing up. And he is really cute too, the girl responds watching the boy leave the arena. You're telling me? The woman next to her smirked, causing Sakura to drop her own smile as she continued, he is getting pretty cute too. Taking her eyes away from the woman, Sakura quickly began looking around the arena, and when she finally found her target, she jumped up. In the next section over, she found Anko, who was standing up slowly, a sly grin on her face as she tracked the blonde making his way to the arena's floor exit. She's going already. Sakura couldn't help but panic as she watched Anko slowly start making her way through the rows of seats, like a predator on the hunt. Snapping back towards her teammate who had finally made it out of the arena past the stretcher heading towards Neji, she knew she had to act quickly as she too jumped up. Sakura. She could hear Ino say as she began making her way to the steps that would lead her to Naruto. Sakura. Where are you going? Sasuke's up next. He can wait. She yelled back, the only thought going through her head being Naruto as she raced towards her teammate, her opponent being the ally hungry Anko. Ino watched Sakura run off and decided she wasn't going to miss out on whatever was going on between them, so she ran down the stairs to follow her pink-haired friend. Sakura found him in an empty hall, his eyes shifting slightly as he looked around nervously. He was clearly waiting for someone by a door. She knew who that would be and needed to get him out of the hallway as quickly as possible. Naruto. She couldn't waste any time and wasn't going to try and talk herself out of what she'd been planning ever since that night in the alley. Her was already on fire and she knew what hose was needed to put it out. Sakura-chan. Naruto was quick to catch himself before he could make himself look suspicious. What are you doing down here? Looking for you, dummy. Sakura was scanning the hallway, looking for any sign of purple hair, or a trench coat. Why'd you run away so fast after your match? I figured you'd like to stay a bit longer and let the crowd cheer you on. Oh, that, he said, a red tint covering his whiskered cheeks as he rubbed the back of his head nervously. Just got really built up. Glancing down at his crotch, I get a little worked up after kicking butt. Do you? She couldn't help but chuckle as she looked over at him, giving a quick look at the bulge she hoped was for her, happy to see Anko still hadn't made her entrance. After not seeing him for weeks, she took notice that he actually grew some and is as tall as her now, a drastic change considering he was slightly shorter than her when Team 7 was formed 6 months ago. Yeah. Naruto dropped his hands, eyes scanning the hallway once again as he too hoped for the Chunin exam proctor to show up soon. He really needed it. Figured I'd rest before my next match, just find a room to take a load off. Take a load off. Sakura had never been too good at flirting, just like Naruto had never been good at lying. As she pushed open the door they were standing next to, it was a bare empty room, besides the neatly made bed that sat in the middle against the wall between two tables with lamps. A perfect room for a tired contestant to rest in, also great for getting your brains ed out. The fire was growing and she could feel the moisture seeping out to stain her panties. Stop looking around and let's go inside. Sakura was being risky, stepping closer, keeping her body closer to his own. Hoping the smell of her overactive would reach him. When she noticed him sniffing the air and then looking at her, his blush returning, she couldn't help but smirk. Inner said, I got ya now. I'm not looking around. Naruto was trying his best, but he was never any good at lying. I was just getting ready to go in before you showed up. Let's go in then. She was hot, the feeling she felt in her stomach during the match growing tenfold. She quickly held open the door as she felt her hands begin to sweat. Her shirt was sticking to her body under her red dress and her mouth felt dry as she noticed Naruto almost gulp. Sakura-chan. Naruto was leaning against the wall next to the door, so nervous it was actually funny, eyes still shifting up and down the hall, which was only serving to piss her off. She just knew he wanted her to leave so that damn whore of a proctor could calm him. That wasn't going to happen, not on her watch. He quickly pushed away from the wall and went into the room. He gave one final look down the hallway, taking one last shot at getting her to leave. He said, "Shouldn't you be waiting out in the arena? I mean, Sasuke's match is coming up." "That's funny." Sakura couldn't help the coy smile she let take her features as she shoved the blonde farther into the room, causing him to stumble backward. "I could be asking you the same thing." She kicked the door closed with a resounding bang. Turning to the door, she turned the lock, not wanting any unexpected visitors. Just then, the speakers in the hallway coming through the walls of the Colosseum cracked to life and a dreary voice blared, "Due to unforeseen circumstances, the next match is postponed. Sasuke Uchiha vs Gaara of the Sand will take place after Shino Aburame vs Kankuro of the Sand. Sorry for the inconvenience and thank you." "Well," Sakura said as she turned from the door, "saved by the bell. I guess Sasuke learned to be late from Kakashi-sensei." Her emerald eyes snapped back to the boy as he looked at the locked door. He seemed to deflate slightly. His plan for the past weeks was to come to a crashing halt, all because Sakura didn't understand what he needed. He didn't understand what he needed, but he was sure of one thing: Enko knew, and that was all he was thinking about. "I thought you came to rest?" she asked quietly as she looked around the room. He too took a look around, his own sapphire-colored eyes taking her in. Red dress, black shorts, headband, and a strange smile he hadn't seen before. "I did, but I kind of have to be alone to actually do it." She was playing along as she faked a look of understanding. "Oh, you did use a lot of chakra in the last match." "That's understandable." "Yeah," he said as she continued to look around, but she could feel it. The stare he was digging into her with as she pretended to not notice. If undressing someone with your eyes was a thing, then she was sure in Naruto's mind she never wore any clothes. He quickly caught himself though, knowing she had never helped him before without being forced to like some glorified medic. He swallowed hard as he said, "I'll meet you outside when I'm done. Just gotta get this done for my next match." "That might take a while," she said almost offhandedly as she looked him in the eye, watching as he shifted under her stare. "I haven't seen you in over 2 weeks, don't you need help?" She could pinpoint the exact moment his mind seemed to register what she said, and as he bit his lip in the dim light of the room he said, "It's fine, Sakura-chan, I got this." "No, it's not." She wanted to pull him into this, make him think it was his idea. Sure, she wanted it, the fire in her core was driving her crazy. But she couldn't let him know just how much she wanted this. After all, she was a good girl. So she continued, "I'm supposed to help you when you need it. I'm your teammate, it's my job." He opened his mouth and quickly shut it, once again shifting slightly under her intense gaze. She could see him struggle for a moment as he said, "I know, but I can do it myself. I don't want to bother you to feel obligated to help Sakura-chan." "You're not bothering me, idiot." She was starting to have second thoughts about her approach as she looked over at the bed. He really was resisting this way too much. "Just sit on the bed and we can get this done quickly so we can watch Sasuke's match." He was about to argue again, something that was getting to her, and as he opened his mouth she quickly interrupted, "God damn it, Naruto, just sit on the ing bed and let me do my job." Naruto slowly sat down, trying to steel his nerves as she walked over. What are you doing?" he asked quietly as she unbuttoned the side of her red dress and pulled it off over her head, tossing it to the side. Now standing in front of him in her black shorts and black undershirt, she kneeled down in front of him. Staring at the hideous orange color of his pants, she could practically feel how hot his face was. She was close, as close as she was the first night. She could feel her body ache as she thought about what lay in wait for her in the pants before her. "Just be quiet, okay?" She quickly reached up, and before Naruto knew what was going on, she was unbuttoning his pants. Sakura-chan. He was so stupid. Why couldn't he just shut up and let her do this? Why make it harder? The zipper was next to go. As she brought the metal down, she felt her body tremble, the room beginning to feel like a sauna. Naruto was either accepting or was too flabbergasted to do anything, so she kept moving forward. The look on her face said she would use her incredible strength to rip the pants off him if he resisted. Have you done it at all yet today? She asked, finally looking up as Naruto stared down. Red in the face, the blonde replied quietly, and no. Yes, she thought hotly as she nodded and began tugging at his pants. Thankfully Naruto lifted his hips allowing her to pull his pants past his ankles. His pants joined her dress as she focused on her target. He wasn't fully hard yet, something that was surprising, but she could see the outline of it in his boxers. I guess the shock of her being so forward was keeping him down but not for long. It's gotten bigger. She was practically biting her lip off in anticipation as she looked down at the bulge. It was thicker, and if she had to guess a little bit longer. What kind of training has he been doing? Will it ruin me? The thought made her body quiver in anticipation, and as she watched the covered flesh grow hard under her gaze, she quickly realized she wanted it too. Sakura was so giddy that she could feel her hands tremble as she reached for the waistband of Naruto's boxers. She felt a multitude of emotions as she watched the bulge slowly fatten up, happiness that she was finally going to satisfy the horrible fire her body had become. She was proud that she had beaten Anko to the hallway, practically stealing the boy from her dirty clutches. She was a little upset the boy hadn't gotten completely hard from the start. I mean, if he really liked her as much as he said he did, shouldn't it be harder than these exams? But most of all, Sakura was hungry, not in the traditional sense, but the same way Anko must have felt when she watched Naruto deliver that winning punch. Her body craved the boy above her, in ways she couldn't even have imagined less than a few months ago. The fire he lit in her those many weeks ago had to be put out, and she knew what would do it. Her love of Sasuke was a thought for a different day if she even felt that way anymore. It was something Sakura would go over when she wasn't practically pissing in her panties while staring at the huge of her teammate. Sakura-chan. Naruto's voice sounded strained as he twitched under her gaze, his eyes wide as he said, I haven't showered or anything. Oh, I know, she thought hotly as she took another deep sniff of the blonde's hot musk. She quickly grabbed the boy's boxers and tugged them down with much more ease than she had with his pants. They joined the pile of clothes against the wall. She could hear Naruto mutter as his sprang free, now hard and ready to be the center of her attention. Sakura couldn't take her eyes off the fat, or the bulging veins that traveled down his shaft. He's been saving up, she thought as she put her hands on his knees and pushed them apart to examine his testicles, slightly thrown off by the sheer size of the boy's balls. They looked heavy and full, something she would come to learn meant fun. Looking back up at the boy's heated face, Sakura fed her tongue across her dry lips as she said, "You remember our rule. You don't tell anyone." Getting a scared nod from the boy, Sakura reached up. Feeling his pulsate in her hand gave Sakura a nostalgic feeling, like Naruto panting with his in her hand was just meant to be. No more solo training for this boy, oh not anymore. She felt him take a deep breath as she gently squeezed and watched the skin of his red shaft rise. She watched Naruto lean back slowly, seemingly calming down as she slowly started jerking him off, running her small soft hand up and down his vicious. The clear liquid started to exit the tip and coat her hand. "Aw man," he said lowly as Sakura slowly picked up the pace, holding onto his tightly as she pumped up and down. Not being able to take her eyes off of her prize. Not being able to get her hand completely around his, "It's really thick." Sakura didn't mean to say it aloud, but it sort of slipped out as she set a steady pace of jerking him off, watching his head flare impatiently. "Is that a bad thing?" Naruto asked, setting aside his arms as he let his body dip back on the bed, letting himself enjoy her soft tender hands. Biting her lip, Sakura slowly looked up at the boy, her emerald eyes meeting his sapphire as she said, "It's not bad, it's just so big." The grin on her face surprised him, but he wasn't going to say anything about it. She felt weird saying it aloud, and as she watched the grin slowly cover Naruto's face, she realized how it sounded. Not that it matters, it's how you use it that counts. Alright. Naruto was somewhat mocking her, And to his credit, she was on her knees, working him over while talking about how big and fat his was. It was expected at this point. Oh, just shut up, she demanded, squeezing his a bit harder, earning a sharp breath as his eyes widen. Knowing full well she could pull it completely off and ruin him for life. Looking down at the swollen head, Sakura felt her mouth moisten almost instinctively. Oh, his voice was a mere whisper as he watched her rise up onto her knees and slowly lean forward, her mouth meeting his. Sakura felt the large head make contact with her lips, running it back and forth to coat her lips in his precum. She then opened her mouth slowly, allowing his girth to press forward. Naruto's body tightened up as he gave a soft hum. Her lips must have really felt good wrapped around him because she watched through half-lidded eyes as he closed his own and fell fully back onto the bed. Yeah, she could feel her tear side as she felt the travel farther and farther into her orifice. Let mama have it all, as she ate all the sweet juice out of him. The taste was driving her crazy and she wanted it all. She could feel her own chakra flaring as their contact but pushed it aside to think about later. She then wasted no time, dipping her tongue against the underside of his, lathering him up as she let spit build in her mouth. She realized just how big the boy was as she felt him hit the back of her throat and had to make a quick retreat. Holy ing God, she thinks, shocked as she pulled back, keeping her wet lips wrapped around the head. Ing at his hard, I don't even think that was a full 4 inches. She quickly grabbed his shaft, bobbing her head slowly as she stroked the rest of his length with her hand. Naruto was in heaven and she knew it. The little oh and ahs he was giving was a clear indication that he was enjoying the ing Sakura was currently giving him. Swirling her tongue around his hotly, Sakura felt him spasm and coat her mouth with a little jet of his hot precum. Swilling it around her mouth, enjoying it to its fullest. Pulling back with a loud pop, Sakura pulled away, stroking his now-s quickly. Holy shit, that's hot, she could hear Naruto grunt, his eyes once again on her as he looked down at her. She felt her body heat up hotter than it's ever been as she leaned forward and swallowed his back up. Letting her free hand fall between her legs, Sakura quickly dug into her spandex and found her painfully wet smooth. MHH, she ed loudly around his as she felt her own sensitive lips up and down, her body leaking outrageous amounts into her shorts. Sakura-chan, Naruto's voice was so deep as he groaned above her. The only other sound in the room was the sound of her ing his length happily, followed by the occasional gag. Her eyes were rolled up into her head as she moved up and down his shaft with her hand doing the same to her. He's loving this so ing much, she was close to coming as she dug 2 fingers inside her in quick pistons. Naruto's arms were twitching slightly at his side, and Sakura couldn't help but notice. Letting go of his shaft, getting a little higher on her knees, she once again tried taking him deeper and was glad to see she was able to take about 5.5 inches down her throat without gagging. Yeah baby, he was whispering, his hands twitching by his side as Sakura let out a low around his. Sakura, that feels so ing good. Please don't stop. Her pink hair caressed his legs as her head moved up and down, adding to his sensory overload. With one hand busy in her, she took her free hand to grasp the boy's large balls, gently kneading them in her soft hand as she ed his as if her life depended on it. She watched his hand slowly rise, only to deflate as he bit his lip, and finally understood what he wanted. Taking her hand away from his cum-filled testicles, she quickly snatched up his hand, and put it on the back of her head. Oh my ing God! He sounded so pleased as he ran his fingers through her soft hair, holding it softly as she continued to bob up and down on his. A load of pre-cum filled her mouth as he moved his hand in her hair, driving both of them closer to completion. Her throat and jaw were sore, but as she watched his disappear and reappear in her mouth, she felt it fade away. She could feel him slowly brushing his hand through her shoulder-length hair as he let her silky locks fall between his finger, and the action simply made her wetter as she tried to add another finger up into her soaked. She watched spit mixed with the boy's pre-cum ooze down his shaft, pooling around his balls and running down his thighs. I'll have to clean him up, she thought happily as she let her fingers roam her insides, with my mouth. That thought sent a shiver down her spine and she could feel her insides spasm around her fingers. Sakura suddenly felt him jerk his hips forward, only a little bit, but still enough to shock her as another inch was forced down her throat. "Aw shit," she heard him grunt as he slowly sat up, the grip he had on her head going from gently to tight as he slowly scooted forward. Now sitting up and placing both of his hands on her head, he started to help her move up and down. Is he about to ram this fat down my throat? Sakura couldn't help but ask the question as she came face to face with Naruto's stomach as he sat there. He must have removed his shirt while on the bed. It would certainly be a shift considering he was trying to stop her about 15 minutes ago. She could feel his hands on her head as he slowly said, "You're so beautiful, Sakura-chan," his swelling even larger in her mouth with each downward movement. She could feel her body twist as she tried her best to ram the rest of his length down her throat, gagging as she happily soaked him with her tongue. Hell. He was pushing her slightly down with his hand, and she felt herself smile mentally. Do it, she thought as she felt her nose come in contact with his pubic hair, taking another deep whiff as she ed down his like a kid in a candy store. I'm sorry, he said quickly as he jumped up and Sakura felt his jump in her throat. She was about to pull back, to ask what he was doing, when she felt the grip on her head tighten drastically, his finger now intertwined in her hair. Oh man, he sounded desperate, like a man who was about to commit a crime he didn't want to. He held her tightly as he plunged his down her throat. Oh my god, was the only thought she could think as she pushed both hands down the front of her shorts, her fingers digging into her smooth and over her. He's gonna kill me with his. Somehow, she was suddenly against the bed, her back resting against the furniture as Naruto now stood opposite. All the times she had practiced on cucumbers could not prepare Sakura for the throating she was about to experience. The first thrust was slow but still forced her to gag as she felt her eyes water. The second was the same, as was the third. For the first time, Sakura felt herself begin to lose her cool as she leaned back into the bed resting her head against the mattress as Naruto thrust downwards. There was no escape. I love you so much. His voice was deeper than it was a minute ago, and for some reason, his body felt so hot against hers as he sped up his pace. She wanted to fight back and knew it honestly wouldn't be that hard with her strength, but watching the piston in and out of her throat through teary eyes was too hot. The smell alone was causing her mind to go blank and her soak her hands. She could feel his hot balls bouncing against her chin and throat as he ed her face, smearing her with a coat of saliva and his ball juice. She wanted this. She wanted him to treat her like a object. He was an animal, which made her one too, and God did she want it. She had been edging for a while, bringing herself close to orgasm only to stop a few seconds beforehand. Listening to Naruto declare how much he was loving this, while feeling his stuff her mouth and throat was too much for Sakura. Her shirt was already ruined from the saliva, tears, snot, and cum running down her face, so she decided to just squirt in her panties. She came with a harsh, sending vibrations up Naruto's and forcing him to shout, hell. The first pump was like an egg being pushed through a garden hose. She could literally feel the first shot of cum traveling up his and straight down her throat into her stomach. Her body locked up as she pulled a hand from her pants and proceeded to squirt her juice all over the floor where she sat. She was a squirter and she knew it, but this was next level. Naruto quickly embedded his length down her throat, burying her nose in his pubes as he gave a loud but satisfied groan. For a whole 2 minutes, Sakura sat against the bed, feeling Naruto blast her insides with his hot cum. Can't even taste. Her mind was going blank from the intense orgasm and lack of oxygen, and right when she thought she was about to pass out, Naruto slowly began to pull away. Hell, he muttered quietly as he slowly pulled away until just his head remained in her mouth. He held her face in his hands, rubbing the tears off her cheeks as he gave a soft groan. She felt another large shot of cum fill her mouth as he finished. She quickly tasted the liquid heat in her mouth, savoring the taste before swallowing the mouthful as best she could, hoping not to appear too happy to the blonde. It was the best thing she'd ever tasted, and as it traveled down her throat she felt a bit unsatisfied that she didn't have more to eat, all of the load already deep in her belly. Next time, and oh yes, there will be a next time, she will taste it all. As soon as the exited her mouth, Sakura began taking a deep breath, reaching her hand up and wrapping it around her wet sore throat. As oxygen reached her brain she began to think a little more clearly. Naruto was, his bobbing hotly in the air as he slouched slightly, the remaining cum in his ran down the shaft. That was awesome. Maybe for you, she snapped hotly, her voice coarse and rough as she looked up at his startled stare. You almost killed me. I need to breathe sometimes, you know. I'm sorry, Sakura-chan. Naruto sounded genuine, but it was hard to take seriously as she watched his still rock-hard drip with both cum and her saliva. Glad she had convinced him she was at least a little angry with his actions, Sakura couldn't help but smile inside. He had just used her like a toy. Not even asking permission as he rammed his down her throat. She'd definitely have to do that again and again. Yeah, well, she took another deep breath as she swallowed, trying to take a bit of the burning away from her throat. You'd better be more considerate next time, or you'll lose any girlfriend you get. But you're the only girl I'd ever want, Sakura-chan, he said quickly, catching her off guard. She felt the flame return to her core at the boy's words, almost cursing as the mind-blowing orgasm she had experienced hadn't helped at all. Why, you're still hard. She tried her best to not sound happy, watching his massive stick swing as she stared up into his ocean blue eyes. Yeah, he muttered almost comically as he rubbed the back of his head. I usually have to go a few times, probably more since I haven't done it in a while. Now's your chance, she thought hotly as she felt the cold on her shirt from the wetness. Okay girl, don't this up. Come here, she ordered and was happy to watch him step forward, placing his back in her reach just a little above eye level as she remained sitting against the bed. She quickly took hold of the dripping length and downed it once again, earning another gasp from the blonde. Sakura quickly ate away all the thick cum and spit that was stuck to the boy's shaft, swallowing it down happily, but not before tasting all his rich and salty load. Oh, Naruto murmured as he watched her clean his up, slowly pulling away while slurping up all the discharged liquids, ing up and down his shaft until it was totally clean. She then pulled away and lifted his large testicles in her hands, bringing them to her mouth as she began to prod with her tongue. She quickly cleaned him up, ing away all the cum that was on his balls and ing his pubes dry. Damn, that's so hot, she heard Naruto say as she let his now clean and balls fall, pushing him by the legs to tell him to stand back. Seeing him notice the large wet stain where she'd been sitting, Sakura stood up shakily with a shrug and a smile. She fell back on the bed. She watched Naruto take a deep breath, a toothy grin forming on his face as he said, "That was amazing." Sakura wanted to agree, but that would totally blow her cover. She instead chose to glare at the boy, which made him stop moving forward. I couldn't have been that great, you're as hard as a rock still. And no, he defended her quickly, pointing to his engorged as the large piece of meat twitched. You were great, Sakura-chan, I promise, I just usually have to spend a lot of time working it out. One time after training all day it took all night before it finally went down. Now that's a night to remember, she thought as she watched his balls sway as he stood in front of her without shame. Looking over the boy now from head to toe. He looked like the perfect male specimen, all lean muscle without a hint of fat. Well, she said lowly as she spread her legs slightly and looked at a clock hanging on the wall, we've gotta do something to get rid of the rest of it. Can't leave you all pent up. Naruto looked at the clock and she could see his eyes widen as he noticed how much time had passed already. Sakura-chan, we gotta go, Sasuke's match is probably almost over already. Don't worry. Sakura rolled her eyes as she watched the blonde turn towards her. There'd be another announcement if Sasuke's match was happening. The other fights must be taking a long time. Oh, yeah, I guess you're right. Plus, She snapped towards the boy. I already started this, and we aren't stopping till you're done. Okay. He waved his hand slowly in defense. Sakura couldn't help but smirk as he said, geez, pushy much. Sakura slowly stood up, and much to Naruto's surprise, began to remove her soaking wet shorts. What the hell are you doing? Naruto was much louder than he needed to be and she was beginning to find herself annoyed. On the plus side, she did see his throb particularly hard when he noticed her grasp her waistband. Shut up, Baka. She quickly gritted as she watched the boy's eyes widen considerably. We need to get this done quickly, right? Well, no faster way than just letting you go all the way. A mischievous smile on her face. All the way. She could literally see the moment the wheels stopped turning as his face seemed to ignite dangerously under her gaze. She decided not to reply with words, instead choosing to pull down her pants, leaving her in her lacy pink wet panties and black undershirt. She hoped he could see just how wet she was as a line of juice ran down her leg. Suddenly the mood shifted, and she felt Naruto's eyes running over her a million miles a minute. Guess I have nice legs, she thought as she watched him take in every bit of her now exposed legs. She gave him a small smile, as she felt herself light up and she noticed his breathing become heavier. She remembered what she had read in one of the books she'd picked up for the occasion. It was said, to be why and to tempt your partner. After the way, Ino told her that Shikamaru liked to watch. She decided to see if it worked on Naruto. From the way Naruto was staring at her, she wouldn't have to try that hard. Turning around to face the bed, she slowly shifted her weight from leg to leg, waving her super round in his face. Then lifting her right foot as she lifted her leg up and hooked it up on the bed. She had never actually shown her butt to anyone before, and as she felt Naruto's eyes roam over her, she suddenly felt embarrassed as she looked over her shoulder at Naruto. She could see his eyes locked onto her butt as drool started to come out of the corner of his mouth. Suddenly she was reminded of Ino in her little show at the cafe. The two had always been competing for Sasuke's affection, and the competition had made Sakura very aware of the positives and negatives of her body. She wasn't as pretty as Ino, something that had once bothered her, but she had come to terms with it. Sure, she may not have been as pretty, but she was certainly beautiful in her own right, and way smarter than Ino could hope to be. Ino was such a perfectionist with her body that Sakura couldn't help but feel a bit smug when she noticed just how much Ino had to worry about it. Sure, Sakura couldn't just pig out due to fear of weight gain, but Ino couldn't even eat a piece of chocolate without gaining a pound, and that really was something Sakura could be happy about. Ino also was a lot bustier than her. Nowhere near Hinata, but way bigger than Sakura, let's just say flat chest, and she often flaunted the fact. That was until they overheard a group of men talking about a woman's behinds, and Sakura got a great deal of satisfaction when Ino realized just how perfectly round Sakura's bottom was compared to hers. I wonder if more men prefer tits or ass. She couldn't help but ponder as she turned back to look at the bed, face hot as she suddenly added, I wonder if Naruto prefers asses. She crawled up on the bed and lowered her head down, giving Naruto a perfect view of her rear end. She gave a small gasp as she felt two hands grab her, one taking her hip tightly while the other palmed her right cheek gently. Oh God, she let out as Naruto's calloused hands ran across her smooth skin slowly. She hadn't even heard him move, but somehow he was standing right behind her now. He wasn't speaking as she felt him push up her shirt, giving him full access to her panty-clad. His hand squeezed her butt tightly, causing her to let out a high squeal as he squeezed. She took a deep breath, absolutely loving the way his large hand traveled over her untouched skin, around the silk panties. As Naruto familiarized himself with her, she let out the air in her stomach as she relaxed against his touch, feeling his hand slip away from her hip as it joined his other on her bottom. The smell rising from her was driving him crazy. Oh, she let out softly as she felt him rub her soothingly, his hands running across hair and down her legs. He massaged her thighs gently as she cooed against his touch. He used her juices like massaging oil to rub her legs. Her body spasmed as his knuckles gently brushed against her covered as he ran his hands back up her thighs. "You're so wet." His voice was deep as she felt him grasp both cheeks tightly, meshing hair in his rough hands. "No, I'm not," she argued to the best of her ability as she felt his hands drop from her. Look." She stuttered slightly as she turned her head around, trying her best to put on her bitch face as she did. "Don't get the wrong idea, abo." Slap. The force behind his slap was enough to shut her up but not to bruise as his hand met her with a harsh impact. "Oh my god." She ed in pain as she felt his hand slowly rub the now beet red cheek and stinging skin of her. "What the Naruto?" "Shut up." Sakura felt her eyes widen at the reply, and quickly turned around and flipped herself over to glare up at her teammate, only to falter when she realized something wasn't right. Naruto's normally ocean-colored eyes were flashes of red, the color vibrant in the dim room. His mouth hung open slightly, giving her a good look at his sharp teeth as his tongue seemed to swivel in his mouth slowly. "Naruto?" she questioned, slowly leaning back as the boy lurched forward, his muscles tensed and pulsating as he did so. She noticed his muscular form and rock-hard moving over her. He went mute as his eyes stayed glued on her body, something she noticed as she moved up more onto the bed and sat up against the pillows. "Naruto?" she asked once again as she sat there. As he moved closer she drew her legs away from him. What's going on? Are you okay?" She could see a sheen of sweat covering his body as he crawled on the bed up to her. The way he spoke sent shivers down her spine, every alert in her body going off as she watched his tongue swipe across his sharp teeth hungrily. I'm gonna go get a medic," she said slowly as she pulled herself away from his taut body. She could see his veins flare as his muscles seemed to contract. As she slowly tried to slip off the bed, his hand suddenly shot forward and grabbed her leg. "Naruto?" She was terrified as she watched him kneel up straight, his coming into view as he tightened his grip on her leg. "Why you need to let go." He suddenly grabbed her other leg and pulled her forward, and with a yelp she fell in front of him on the bed, her eyes widening as she felt his hands grip her legs at the ankles. "I said to let me go, Naruto," she demanded this time, biting her lip as she felt an intense heat coming from the boy's body. A heat that matched her own as she lay there with him between her spread legs. The inner part of her cheering him on. He pulled her toward him once again, setting her in front of him as he dangled her legs to either side of his own, positioning himself between her knees. She was too afraid to fight back as she watched him drop his head between her legs, his red eyes shooting up to meet her face as he suddenly took a deep inhale. "Sakura-chan." He sounded pleased, his eyes closing as he deepened the inhale. He slowly exhaled, teeth grinding as his body shook, his eyes opening to meet hers once again. "I need to get rid of this oozing right now." Before she could even respond, her panties were being ripped from her as Naruto dived between her legs. "No, Naruto, oh 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 oh." His name exploded from her as she felt his mouth meet her smooth bald, lapping up all her juices as his tongue quickly drove itself into her core. Ah! She could feel the fire come back full force as Naruto quickly set a pace, lapping at her like a thirsty animal. Without thinking she pulled her legs up and wrapped them around his moving head and arched her back in unrestrained joy. "Give mama what she needs," her inner voice yells. Looking down she watched his head move, as he lowered his body into the bed, moving her legs onto his shoulders as he resumed exploring her most private parts. "You want this to Sakura-chan?" His voice came out in a low mumble as he enjoyed her virgin, spreading her tight pink lips apart with his mouth and drinking up all her juices. The flow was non-stop at this point and the bed was getting wetter by the minute. Sakura could only throw her head back as he worked her over, hands gripping the sheets between her fingers as she felt his hands reach underneath her to grab her butt. "I love this round so much." She heard him groan as she felt him separate her cheeks, squeezing them tightly in his rough hands. She was so close, something that was making her head reel. Never had she come this quick, but as she felt Naruto's mouth kiss her she understood why. His tongue was longer than normal and rough like a dog, or dare we say a fox. Do you like this, Sakura-chan? His tongue was running small circles around her lips, stopping to poke her with each pass. She couldn't say anything other than a strangled, "Ughhhhhh," as she felt him begin to lower his mouth. She put her hands in his hair and tried her best to hold him close as he worked her over. I wanna taste every bit of you, Sakura-chan, he mouthed as he began to move his head, his hand replacing his mouth as he dipped a finger up into her. So big, she thought hotly as his large finger filled her to the brim, her body tightening around the foreign object as she felt his mouth run across her. She was losing her mind and did not care one bit. Sakura-chan is so delicious. She heard him chuckle as he got closer and closer to something she never imagined before. What are you doing? She all but screamed as she felt her body arch on the bed. Her breathing became harder and harder as she felt Naruto spread hair as he reached his destination. Definitely Anman. Her mind conjured on its own as she lit the room with a loud scream, her nails tearing into the bed as Naruto's tongue slowly circled the ring of her anus, dipping his face between her cheeks. He added one more finger in her as she felt her orgasm hit her like a lightning bolt. Ah yes. She screamed as she felt her abs tighten and her began to squirt around Naruto's fingers. The boy must have been prepared because he immediately retreated back to her splashing vagina and quickly resumed where he left off. She once again wrapped her legs around his head and used both hands to hold his head where she needed it most. What felt like hours passed as Sakura's green eyes rolled up into her head, her body tight as she felt her leak into Naruto's waiting mouth as he hungrily drank everything she had to offer. Only when she felt Naruto slowly pull away from her sensitive lips did she realize she had clawed the bed and broken a nail. Grinding her teeth, she opened her eyes as her body fell from his shoulders, still shaking as she looked up at Naruto as he slowly sat on his heels, his tongue swiping across his upper lip to clean the remainder of her juices off. She was brought out of her post-orgasm coma as she heard his deep voice ask, "Was that good, Sakura-chan?" He reached over and ran fingers down each side of her smooth lips, causing her brain to misfire and go blank. She felt the bed dip as he moved closer, and she fought to keep her body still as she felt Naruto crawl over her. She could see his canines poking out from his mouth as he smiled, his eyes twisting in color as he stopped above her. "Do you wanna leave your shirt on?" He sounded so calm, his voice now steady as he hovered above her. What did he mean? She was still so brain dead from her last orgasm that she could barely comprehend what he was saying. Just don't stop was the only thing bouncing around in her endorphin-filled head. "Here," he said, helping slide the shirt off her body as he raised her trembling arms, "I much rather see all of you while we do this." Letting out another deep breath, and swallowing the spit in her mouth, Sakura let Naruto remove her shirt, leaving her clad in only her black bra. Her shirt joined the pile of clothes, the cool air hitting her skin and making goosebumps along her sides. "There we go." The hunger in his voice sounded dangerous, and the way his eyes trailed her body let her know that there was no way she wasn't about to get ed. "I need to see all of you, Sakura-chan," as he started to pull at her bra. Knowing he didn't have a clue, she reached behind herself and undid the hooks before he ripped it off her. With the bra gone, he looked down at her small. He could see her S standing up proud and long. Their pink, almost red color stands out from her white skin in contrast. He ran his hand over her chest, rubbing over her and sending shock waves through her body as he rubbed over her overheated S. She suddenly was forced to into the boy's mouth as he swooped down and caught her lips with his own. "I'm losing my mind," she thought as she felt his rough tongue brush against her own as she melted into the kiss. "I've wanted this for so long." His gruff voice rang lowly as he pulled away slowly, always imagining how our first time would be. Sakura was lost for words as she felt her tongue have a wiggle fight with his, her eyes focused on his. She wanted this, had dreamed about it for months, and with Anko had kinda fought for it. He let go of her lips and started to kiss in his way down her neck until he found her S. She arched her back into him as he started to and on one then the other. drawing them into his mouth and pulling them gently with his teeth. With both hands in his hair, she let out a long and wrapped her legs around him. Pulling back with a crazy grin on his face, he pulled her legs up and set them into position on his shoulders. She chose not to reply as she felt him move a hand to her hip and suddenly felt something fat being pressed against her as he used his other hand to hold his steady. Shish! She couldn't help but grit her teeth as she felt his head slowly stretch her opening, trying its best to squeeze inside. She was so wet it didn't find any real resistance. "You're tight," he said quietly, holding his heart in one hand while holding her steady with the other. He tried to push once again, Sakura groaning as she felt her wet lips give way to the rock-hard head. Oh, it was happening, and she couldn't be happier. She heard him take a deep breath, the large helmet of his managing to force its way into her tight virgin hole as he slowly thrust. She could feel him place his hands back on her hip as she closed her eyes, ready for the main event. "I'm gonna push it in now," and she felt a pressure in her body build as inch after inch of fat hard was forced deeper in. "I can't believe it's all fitting. More, she thought, rubbing her hands on the muscles on his chest. She quickly clamped down with her, as she felt Naruto slowly plunge deeper. She could feel his throbbing length moving inside of her, stretching her body as it invaded her. Sweat broke out of every pore of her body. "It feels like you're sticking to me," he groaned as he managed to fit about 6 inches inside. Sakura simply tried to relax as the molten hot began to pull out, leaving an empty feeling behind. "Oh, that's good." He was enjoying himself, she thought as she felt him slowly drag his length from her body, stopping at his head as he reinserted himself. Naruto had to have been ing his Jutsu or something because he was taking this a lot better than she was. It didn't hurt, which she was thankful for, but as she felt him start to build his movements, Sakura could feel her body freaking out with shocks of pleasure. With every thrust, a long drawn out was forced from her smaller body as Naruto planted himself on her and began to pump away. Their chests rubbing against each other gave her a new level of pleasure to enjoy as her s were crushed between them. As she felt the speed of his thrusts quicken, she could feel herself loosening up to accept more. "There you go." She heard him mutter in her ear as he managed to force another few inches inside, his hips almost meeting her as he kept pumping. With her knees almost touching her shoulders, she found herself wide open for him to enjoy. "Oh no." She couldn't help it, her voice was coming out choppy as she felt her stomach his. She wanted this for weeks, no months, and her body seemed to agree considering she was milking him. She felt him twitch, every vein along his throbbing as he ed her hard. "This is a tight." She loved how he sounded as his nails dug into her hips, the only sound occupying the room being her s and their skin meeting in a harsh slap. She could feel his large testicles slapping her and legs as he ed her, holding her tightly as he worked his oversized into her muff. With her eyes rolled up into her head month open, she looked like a picture out of a wet dream. "That feels good, doesn't it?" His voice was in her ear as he leaned over her, moving one hand from her hip as it circled over her body to her chest. "Do you like this?" he said as he pulls on her, getting a crazed from her. Trying her best to remain semi-human, feeling his hot breath on her shoulder and neck, Sakura could only nod as she gave a small, mhh. As her small squeezed harder, trying to milk him dry. "Yeah, you do." He sounded pleased with himself, his thrust suddenly quickening, forcing her deeper into the bed as he started thrusting harder. "You love taking this. Even if you don't like me." She grits her teeth, feeling her tighten around him as he finally managed to fully sheath himself deep in her stomach. She shook her head no at his words as she felt her legs shake against him. "What are you saying, Sakura-chan?" His voice was piercing through her as he ed her silly, now on his knees, his hand now roughly pawing her as he continued. "You keep saying you love Sasuke, but I can tell you enjoy this, enjoying me. Please shut up." She sounded weak, like a bitch at the end of her rope. Her body was on fire, and when she tried to open her eyes, all she could see were stars. He was literally ing her into unconsciousness. He shifted his grip to the back of her thighs and pushed her legs down to the bed next to her sides, folding her in half. She could feel his thrust become shorter but harder. His breathing was getting deeper and his movements more desperate. Tell me what you want. You're under me right now. Sweating like a whore as you take me. Tell me. Sakura was dying. It was the only explanation as she felt her chest tighten and her hips give out. She was being ed to death and he is killing her. Me. She ed out. Give me everything you got. Fill me up. As she came so close to coming, any sense of modesty flew out the door. Sakura dropped right there, her body shaking uncontrollably as she felt the first shot of his nuts fill her in one go, his voice groaning loudly as he began to unload into her womb. Stream after stream jetted into her as deep as it would go, and once filled leaked back out around his thrusting. She felt her body release itself, pouring onto the bed as she milked him for all he was worth. His was happy to give her more than enough cum to fill her to the top and more. Remember this, Sakura-chan? His voice was strained as he fell on her, keeping his still coming buried inside her snatch. Remember how good this was? And just like that, Sakura Haruno was out like a lamp. Sakura woke up to find Naruto running his hands up and down her body from her lips to her mouth as a puddle formed under her butt. When her eyes flashed open and she slowly gained focus, she looked into those now ocean blue eyes. Seeing her awake, he smiled brightly and placed his hand over her. You're so smooth, Sakura-chan, he whispered. Yeah, I wax, she mumbled, sharing a personal secret without a thought. I love it, he said, leaning over her and kissing her full on the month, his tongue entering her mouth with no resistance. As he continued to tongue wrestle with her, she wrapped her arms in him and pulled him closer. Needing air, they pulled apart and she felt something hard and wet on her leg. Looking down, she can see his dripping laying across her leg, still hard and ready to go. I guess you weren't joking about taking all night, huh? She said while pushing him down and sitting up. With him on his back and standing tall, she crawled over his legs until she was kneeling between his legs. Naruto put both his intertwined fingers behind his head to watch what she had in mind. As she uses both hands to hold his at the base, she leans forward to give the head a good cleaning. After ing it all around, she puts the head in her mouth and as hard as she can and gets a mouthful for her trouble. Sitting back, she looked at the stupid smile on his face. So how long was I out? You didn't do anything perverted, did you? She said, giving him the look. No, I didn't, I swear. You were out like 20 to 30 seconds tops. Happy to see she still had some measure of control, she swings her leg over his waist and crawls up on top of him. She starts to rub her smooth up and down his length, keeping a close eye on his face, waiting to see how long she can get away with this. As she begins to build up speed and the heat begins to gather in her core, Naruto grabs in each hand and gently pulls and rubs them. He learned that her S may be small, but her S are super sensitive. Go for it, she thinks, as she shudders and shakes her whole body. Stopping her movements, she pulls his up and places the head against her. Sitting back, slowly getting used to being filled once again. Her tight S him in as she goes down, and with a satisfying groan, she fully seats him inside. She starts to rock back and forth as if listening to some internal music, her pace growing faster and faster but never letting his out one little inch. The feeling of her super tight squeezing and ing on him is driving him mad, and he starts to try to buck his hips up into her. Suddenly stopping, she put her hands on his chest and looks him in the eye. Let me do it this time. I let you do what you wanted. With that, she returns to her internal dance music and he lays there trying his best not to push her over and the hell out of her. After a couple of more minutes of this torture, I begin to move up a little bit each time, grabbing his hands and putting them back on my eye, whisper, pull on them, as I start moving my velvet fist faster. As he began to work over my S once more, I couldn't help but increase my movements more and more until I had to throw back my head and scream, the greatest orgasm in the whole world. I know he sees me shake and quiver as his lap gets flooded with my love juice. Going to have to get rubber sheets pop in her head as she gives out and falls on his chest. Still buried deep in her core, Naruto rubs Sakura's back, wondering if she passed out again. As he goes lower and grabs her in both hands, getting ready to use her like a doll, she looks up. Good God, you didn't come, you're so hard still. With that, she pulls herself up and swings around, kneeling next to his head and leaning forward and swallowing his meat down to the base. Holding herself there for a couple of seconds, she pulls upping as hard as can, causing the poor boy to curl his toes. Pulling him out and sitting up, she giggles out, "Damn, I taste good," before lowering back down to continue working him over. Seeing her plan, Naruto puts his hands on her hips and without her missing a stroke, picks her up, and puts her on his face. With the energy of an overactive, unpredictable ninja, he does everything he can to make her squirm. With her small round firmly in the palms of his hands, he starts to buck his hips into her face. "That's it, baby, give it to mama," she thinks as he starts to face her. At least in this position, she can take him fully without choking. Feeling him getting nearer the end, she palms his balls in both hands and takes him down until her lips hit the base of his over and over. Feeling his swell up and explode once again in her throat, she thinks, "Oh no, not this time," and pulls back so only his head remains in her mouth. With both hands firmly wrapped around his slimy cum for mama, she thinks as the second load of cum shoots out. This tastes so good, more, as she frantically moved her hands up and down, pumping the cum from his balls. As the last of his load fills her mouth, Naruto shoves a finger up her and her for all he is worth. As a wave of pleasure and pain shoots up her spine, she comes hard, losing her grip on his and allowing him to sink it once more completely down her throat. "I going to die this time, I can't move." After a long minute, she feels his get a little softer, and with a grunt, Naruto pushes her off him and she lands on her back in the middle of a very wet bed. Is it over? A part of her hopes not, as she gulping air into her lungs, she looks over to see Naruto slowly sitting up with his back to her. "Damn it, Naruto, you're going to kill me if you keep doing that." A girl's got to breathe, trying to sound fierce, but her words come out as a whispering whine. "Sorry, Sakura-chan, you're so good I can't help it." He stands up, turns around, and looks down at me. I know I must look like a total mess covered in cum as I feel it drying on my face and leaking from my to add another wet stain to the bed. As he stares at me, his swells up to full attention once again. "Oh, God, not again," she thinks. "Ya baby, let me have it one more time," says the voice in the back of her consciousness. Seeing that instrument of destruction pointing at her once again, the itch in her returns. What is wrong with me? I can't get enough. As she sits up, pulling her legs under her butt and facing Naruto, she can feel her s getting hard again, with an aching to be touched. She sees Naruto opening the nightstand drawer and pulling out a towel. He starts to clean off her face like you would a child who can't eat their ice cream fast enough on a hot day. "I can do it," she said, pulling the towel from his hand and wiping her face and chest clean, little waves of joy as she touched herself. With a sigh and shrug to her lost dignity, she rises up on her knees and cleans her and legs clean before throwing the towel in Naruto's face. With a laugh, he bats it off his face to be knocked to the floor. With a crackle, the speakers in the hall come to life, with that haha troublesomely long match between Shikamaru Nara and Temari ending with Shikamaru Nara yielding. We start the match between Sasuke Uchiha and Gaara of the Sand as soon we clear the arena. He looks at me with hungry eyes. I see his bounce up and down as he moved from foot to foot. "We should go, don't you think?" he says, staring at me with a strange look. Knowing this may be my last chance to get a good for weeks, I grab his. "We can't have you going out like this. I think you just need to let one more out." He groans. "We don't have time, Sakura-chan." My mind races trying to come up with something. I know, he loves my butt, and with that, I turn around and bend over on all fours. "Come on, give it to me, you can come as fast as you want," I say, wiggling my at him, knowing he can see everything as I lower my head onto a pillow. I feel his hands rub my cheeks, then he grabs my hip in one and uses the other, guiding in his to my yearning. Without a pause, he shoves it into me to the base. As I hear the slap of his waist hitting my eye, think, "Oh Kami, he going to ruin me," as I push back for more. There is no more gentleness in this. We don't have time and he knows it. Like a bitch in heat I whine for him to go faster as he builds a steady beat against my the slapping sound grows loud but I barely hear it as I feel my orgasm growing. Burying my face in the pillow I scream out as a massive mind-altering orgasm hits me from his relentless pounding of my. I can feel his swell and let loose deep inside me. I squeeze as hard as I can with my trying to draw out this feeling as my whole body has a convulsion. I feel him put his head on my back between my shoulder blades and let out a deep sigh. Pulling out he says, "We got to Sakura-chan." I fall to my side and stare dumbly at him as he starts to get dressed. I can't move as my muscles are still twitching with the shock waves of the best orgasm of my life. "Got to get me more of that," says the voice in the back of my head. All I can do is agree with it. The loudspeakers come to life and announce the arrival of Sasuke. "The bastard showed up finally," says Naruto as he heads to the door. With one hand on the handle he turns and looks at me. "You going be okay?" he says before opening the door. "Yeah, I will join in a couple of minutes." Nodding to me he leaves me with cum running out of my and down the crack of my eye. Know I have a stupid little grin on my face and I don't care. That was good, she couldn't help but say aloud. If she had dreamed about Naruto ing her like an animal and using her tiny body for his pleasure, then the blonde must have been some kind of mind reader, cause he did that and more. I can't really comprehend what just happened to me or why I did what I did. All I know is I have to do that again, but at least the craving is gone. I look and see dark bruises already forming on my hips and I can only assume on my. Sakura hissed as she slowly sat up and spread her legs, eyes widening as she watched the thick white liquid begin to spill from her insides. "This bed will need to be burned," she giggled. As she watched Naruto's cum slowly ooze from her somewhat gaping. Sakura couldn't help but smile dumbly. Doing this again for sure was the only clear thought she had. Going to be sore from this. Hope I can walk straight, she thinks with the voice in her head laughing. Legs tingling she walks to the pile of clothes to get dressed. Seeing as everything but her red dress is covered in her or Naruto's cum, she uses another towel from the dresser to wipe herself clean as more cum flows from her nether regions. Putting on the dress she rolls the mess into one of the towels and tosses it in the trash can. I am not walking outside with this in my hands. It looks like Gaara of the Sand may have Sasuke on the ropes. Walking to the door bow-legged she looked down the empty hallway, letting out a long breath in relief. Thank God no one was there to see her walk of shame, leaving the room and heading to the restroom at the end of the hall, leaving drops of cum in the hall with each step. Quickly entering the restroom she looked at herself in the mirror. She had a stupid grin on her face that she couldn't make go away and she looked the definition of Ed happy. She spots showers at the end of the room and hangs her dress on a hook by the shower door. She enters the stall for a good hot shower and uses the wash towels to clean herself thoroughly. Taking the time to wash her face and clean her hair before throwing the red dress back on, she ran back to the arena. As Sakura reached the bottom of the stairs leading up into the arena, a hand shot out of the shadows and grabbing the back of her dress slammed her back into the wall. "It's really not nice what you did to me, Pinky." A very dangerous voice caught Sakura completely off guard. Shaking her head to clear her thoughts, she looked to where the voice was coming from. Seeing a very pissed off Anko, with one hand on the wall by her head and the other holding a small colorful snake next to her eye. "I knew I should have stopped you when I saw you run down the hall, but I thought you didn't have the balls to deal with a jinchuriki, especially one that has been saving up for a special occasion. But no, I thought you would run scared as soon as he pulled it out of his pants. He is my teammate, I know how to handle him," Sakura yelled in Anko's face. If this was the end she would not go out with a whimper. "Haha, sure you do, Pinky. Sure you do. I will say he did leave looking drained. You sure there wasn't someone else in there helping you?" A grinning Anko said, waving a snake in Sakura's face some more. "I don't know what you're talking about, lady. I did it all on my own." "That is too funny. You took his precious little virginity on your own. That takes guts and has to be one of the stupidest things I have heard in a long time. If he lost control he would have ripped you in half." Putting the snake back in her pocket, Anko stepped back and gave Sakura a long good look. Sakura couldn't help the smug smile that took over her features as she pushed some wet hair behind her ear. I don't know what you're talking about, lady. All I know is Naruto enjoyed ing me a lot more than he would have ing you. Sakura didn't even see Anko move before she felt the hand around her throat and her feet leaving the ground. That's it, Pinky. This ends here. With fire in her eyes, Anko pulled out a knife. Suddenly Anko looks back up the stairs to the arena, hearing screams and the sound of people running. Now what? Anko pushed Sakura down and turned on her heels, and runs up the stairs. This isn't finished, Pinky, Sakura heard as Anko exited the top of the stairs. Hearing more screams and the sound of fire jutsu, Sakura made her way cautiously up the stairs, not knowing what would greet her at the top. Chaos. Total and complete chaos. The arena was full of fighting ninjas with kunai and shurikens flying everywhere. Running over to a fallen civilian to see if she could help, turning the plump woman over, she sees blood pooling under the woman's head and a kunai in her throat. Stepping back in shock and remembering her training, she looks for her team. Without a sound, Kakashi-sensei is standing next to her with both eyes bare and his Sharingan spinning. What happened? Where are Naruto and Sasuke? A shaken and confused Sakura asked her sensei. It was a trap. The sand attached as soon as their Jinchuriki, Gaara transformed and attached Sasuke. Where is he now? Asked Sakura, desperate to find her team. See that missing section of wall over there? After Sasuke wounded him, Gaara ran off that way, and both Naruto and Sasuke are chasing him, said Kakashi, never once looking at her as he scanned for enemy ninja. I have to stay here to help protect the remaining villages. I need you to go after them and make sure they don't get themselves killed. You hear me, Sakura? Get them to retreat if Gaara gets fully transformed, said Kakashi, taking a moment to look at her. Having no idea what a fully transformed Gaara would look like, but knowing that her team needs her, Sakura runs off following the trail of destruction. Wondering about where all this energy that seemed to fill her body came from as she ran, she made a note to ask about with a Jinchuriki later. If there was a later. Entering the forest that surrounds the village, Sakura continued after her team, the fallen trees giving her a clear path and the sounds of fighting in the village slowly fading, being replaced by shouts of her teammates and the crashing of trees. The sound of 10,000 birds and a scream from Sasuke leads her straight into a sea of sand and the boys fighting for their lives. To say that fight was epic would be an understatement, though, Sakura, as she leaned against a falling tree trying to clean the sand out of her hair and off her dress. Damn, sand gets everywhere, she thinks as she reaches under her dress to clean herself. At least she wasn't wearing wet biker shorts, or really anything under her dress at the moment. Damn, sand would turn to cement. How the hell was she going to tell anyone about what just happened? First a giant frog, a frog for Kami's sake, then some crazed sand monster taller than the trees with Naruto bouncing all around it. Once the nine-tailed fox showed up, she had no idea where Sasuke ended up. As for her, the sand sent her flying away from the madness, and a Naruto clone was able to catch her before she ended up impaled on a broken tree branch. The clone wasn't so lucky, but she thanked Kami for Naruto still thinking of her. Now, with a deathly silence, she stood up and looked around for any sign of her team. Walking toward the village was just as good as any other direction and a lot fewer trees in the way, so off she went. After 20 minutes, Sakura heard voices. With what skill she had in stealth, she snuck up on Naruto and Gaara, both on the ground crawling toward each other. It was a sight to behold, the two most powerful ninjas of her generation reduced to crawling like one-year-old babies. Trying not to laugh, she moved closer to see what they were shaking fists at each other for. Ah, I get it now. She could clearly hear Naruto using the full force of his Tak no Jutsu on Gaara, who seemed to be reeling from the force of it. Not even the one-tailed beast and Gaara's inherent psychopathic tendencies could withstand Naruto's Tak no Jutsu. Seeing the drag marks behind them and how slow they were still going, trying to get to each other, Sakura estimated the jutsu had been going on for at least 20 minutes. It was a wonder Gaara was still moving, or at least he should be falling in love with Naruto at this point. As Gaara's defenses fell and the full effect of the Tak no Jutsu overwhelmed him, Gaara turned over on his back and declared Naruto his first true and only friend. Finally, that's over, thought Sakura as she came out from behind the tree and walked over to help Naruto stand. As he stood on wobbly legs, she brushed the sand off of him, seeing as usual it got into everything. Once Naruto could stand on his own, Sakura looked over at Gaara, wondering if she needed to touch the crazy little redhead when she saw Temari gliding down from the treetops on her fan like an upside-down kite. Thank Kami she can deal with it, him, though, Sakura pushing stay hair out of her face. When Kankuro walked out of the bushes, Sakura moved behind Naruto as he tensed up. Seeing the puppet still on his back, Naruto relaxed and said, "Hi guys," with one of his trademark stupid grins. As the siblings picked up Gaara between them, looking him over for any injuries, seeing none and not being surprised at all, Temari said, "Thank you for not killing my little brother. We heard what you said and agree that peace between our two villagers must happen. We will talk again, Naruto, but first I must take care of my bother." While Temari and Kankuro walked Gaara back toward the village hidden in the leaves, Naruto began to sway back and forth, and like the trees around them, he fell over straight into the waiting arms of the Sakura. Damn, he is heavier than he looks, thought Sakura as she lowered him to the ground. Opening his jacket to check for injuries, she was surprised to see that most of his visible skin was covered in burns. This must be from using the demon fox chakra. Having lost all her ninja tools in the fight, she had nothing to use to help, but as she contemplated picking him up and putting him on her back to carry him to the hospital, the burns began to bubble and heal right before her eyes. Staring in wonder as the process of growing skin and tissue moved like a wave over his body, leaving perfect skin in its wake, she thought. So that is why I never see scares anywhere. With nothing to do as the demon in him did its work, Sakura stood up and looked around the clearing, hoping to see some sign of Sasuke. I kind of hope he is not dead, but that was one hell of a fight, as flashes of frogs, fox demons and giant sand monsters rolling around the forest came to mind. Hearing Naruto coming around, I squatted down next to him and put my hand on his forehead. He was on fire. I wish I knew what I could do to help. "Oh Sakura-chan, I don't feel so good," he groaned, looking over at me. "Hey, you don't have on any underwear," he said, staring at my exposed as I squatted there, legs slightly spread. I shrugged. Didn't have time to go home for clean ones, with a war starting and all. Naruto smiled and rubbed the back of his head, sat up, said, "Can we go back home now?" "Sure Naruto, let me help you up." I pulled him upright and draped his arm over my shoulders. As we began the slow walk back to the village, he slowly regained his strength and within 20 minutes was walking on his own. "That was one hell of a fight," I said, wanting to break the boredom. A 30-minute run at ninja speed was going to take 2 hours of walking to get back to the walls of the village. Rubbing the back of his head, Naruto gave a little laugh. "Yeah, it wasn't. I don't remember all of it. Some of it is just a blur of," with one of his dumb laughs, "you know, sand." Thinking he made a great joke, Naruto stopped and laughed so hard he had to put his hands on his knees to stop from falling over. "Idiot," I said, walking faster to get away from having to deal with this fool. "Come on Sakura, wait up," as Naruto came jogging up to walk beside me. "It was funny, you know, all that sand made it hard to see." "Drop it," I said in a flash of anger. "You know I didn't find Sasuke and he could be dead under a log or something," I added, trying to make him take this more serious. "He's not. When I was falling from the head of the sand monster, I could see him tree jumping back to the village," said Naruto, rubbing the back of his head as he recalled the sight of Sakura running back to the village. I stopped and spun around. "He abandoned you," I screamed. Naruto put his hand over my mouth and I glared at him over his fingers. Once I calmed down, he moved away. "No Sakura-chan." Once he saw I had defeated Gaara, he just headed back to the village. "It's no big deal," he said in a calm voice I had never heard him use before. "Are you kidding me? It's a big deal. We are a team and we need to take care of each other. When we get back, I am going to." Naruto put his hand over my mouth again, but this time for a different reason. Did you hear that? He whispered over his hand, pulling me close. Voices. Yes, I could hear someone talking, but not quite clear to understand them. I nodded my head in the affirmative so he would let me go. We have to check it out. It could be sound shinobi planning more attaches. We moved quietly toward the sound, Naruto moving with stealth gained from years of hiding from the villagers. God, this thing is heavy. How does he carry it around all day? Looking around a tree through some bushes, I could see Kankuro lowering Gaara's gourd of sand down and leaning it against a tree. With his endless supply of chakra, what do you think? Said Temari as she came into view, still holding Gaara up and walking slowly over to the gourd to lower him down next to it. As Kankuro started doing some stretching exercises to get the kinks out, he looked over at Temari, who was bent over looking at Gaara. Temari still had on her gray battle kimono that went down to her mid-thigh with a pair of mesh net shorts underneath. Bent over, she displayed her tight round for all to see. Nice ass, whispered Naruto, now standing behind me looking over my should. Looking back at him, I mouthed, "Be quiet," to him, hoping not to get seen. As I started to turn to leave, Naruto grabbed my shoulders and whispered again, "Look." I turned back to see what had gotten his undivided attention and was frozen in place. Kankuro had walked up behind Temari and was rubbing here under her kimono. Temari didn't even flinch or even respond, but continued to check on Gaara. Once she was satisfied he was alive and breathing, she turned her head to Kankuro and said, "We don't have time for that now," but still not pushing him away as he added his other hand and reached up higher under her kimono. "Come on, Temari, I've been fighting all day, the buildup of oozing is killing me." Standing up and turning to face him, Temari said, "Why do I have to have such stupid bothers?" She was greeted with a stupid grin and a shrug. She gave a quick look around the small clearing they were in, and Naruto and I slid back behind the tree, hoping she wasn't a censor nin or we would be caught. Hearing the sound of a zipper and a low groan, we assumed it was safe to look again. Leaning my head around the tree with Naruto looking over me, we could see Temari on her knees in front of Kankuro giving him a truly professional blow job. His wasn't that special in my opinion, but having only seen one in real life, who am I to judge? It was 6, maybe 7 inches and seemed to fit completely down Temari's throat with ease. As she moved up and down his length, I could see her free hand in his pants massaging his balls. Using her other hand around his base, she pulled back and edged the head, enticing another groan from the boy. Pulling back with a grin, she then started to up and down the full length before ing the whole thing back down her throat. She repeated these steps, teasing her bother relentlessly until he couldn't take it. Kankuro grabbed a ponytail on each side of her head and started to her face. Now I know why she had that stupid hairstyle, I thought. Feeling my own core heating up, I felt like we needed to leave, but the sight of them had me rooted to the spot. Temari had now placed both hands on Kankuro's hips to try to control the thrusting movements and to give herself a chance to breathe. With his head thrown back and eyes closed, he didn't seem to care. "Sakura, look. Gaara is waking up." Naruto's hot breath on my ear knocked me from my trance, and I looked to see Gaara standing up and moving over to the couple. He stood there watching as Kankuro face ed his sister, and with a shiver followed by a "Yeah," he unloaded his pent-up balls down her throat. With a short little thrust and pulling on her hair, he finished with a satisfying groan. As he stood back with his flapping in the wind, Temari looked up at him. "You feel better now," she said, starting to get up. Gaara walked over behind the kneeling girl and pushed her forward so she landed on her hands. "Gaara, you're awake," Temari said, still not moving. She seemed to be waiting for something. Gaara pulled her kimono up her back and then pulled down her shorts to her knees in one practiced motion. Kankuro, seeing Gaara in action, zipped himself up and went to sit down next to the gourd to watch. "Nice was all I could think of as Gaara slowly caressed her cheeks one after the other. My own juices began to pool at my entrance as Gaara reached between Temari's legs to slide a finger in and out. I could see how wet his hand was and I wanted the same. Looking back at Naruto, I could see him frozen in place. he wasn't even blinking those damn sapphire blue eyes of his. Forgetting about him for the moment, I looked back to see Gaara had pulled out his. Now that is what I'm talking about. Like Naruto, he was hung like a horse and clearly proud of it. As he put the head of his against Temari's now clearly wet and open blonde hair rimmed, I felt Naruto pulling up my dress in the back and running his hands all over my bare. I guess not wearing underwear had its perks. As Gaara sank his tool to the base into Temari in one push, Naruto cupped my in his hand and started to rub it oh so slowly. I was sore and a little worn out from the ing he gave me not 3 hours ago, but my still responded, and what's a girl to do? With the feeling of his calloused hand and some of that ing sand on my eye, had to push back, wanting more. With my eyes glued to Gaara, he pounded into Temari over and over. I could hear her asking for more as Gaara started going fasting and deeper. She lowered her head to the ground and gave Gaara full access to he.